Hey everybody, how's everybody doing today? Happy Wednesday to everybody. Just give me a second here to get myself set up and we'll get started in a second. If you could just do me a favor though, and let me know that you can hear me wherever you're listening from. Just let me know in the chat box on Zoom or YouTube. That would be fantastic. And we'll get started. And then if you've got your questions ready to go, that would be great too. Okay, perfect. All right, there we go. All right, everything is set. Uh, Everything is ready. So let's get started without further ado. So we're going to answer your questions today. So let's get started with our first question. And our first question is, sir, which makes me feel unbelievably old, but I'll deal with that. How can we have an advantage over our competitors? That's a very broad question. And also, if anyone can make a video or YouTube showing in which areas we have an advantage, like what things make us bigger, different, or unique, and how can we stay ahead of the competition? That's such a broad question. There is no way that anybody can answer that specifically for you in terms of what's going on. The key thing is you want to have, just in broad strokes, you want to have a sustainable competitive advantage, whatever that might be. So when we think about those words, sustainable competitive advantage, the key word in there is the sustainable piece. What is different about you that is going to be difficult for others to replicate what you're doing so that your advantage sustains over time, which means then you can build on that advantage and continue. If you do what good companies do, they're always innovating, they're always coming up with new things, and they build on things and they make things better and better and better, and they grow their lead rather than having people eat into their lead. So that's the way to think about that question, from a competitive standpoint. Is the first question is, what's unique about what you're doing? Why are you, typically when we start companies, we come up with a better way of doing things than what's out there today. So if we have this better way of doing things than what's out there today, the first thing is, what is it? Why are we better? And then why are we going to be able to sustain it? You have to be able to answer those three questions. And they're all important questions. So that's what I would tell you. I hope that helps. All right, let's go to our next question. Why do investors, directly or indirectly, discriminate against service-based businesses? They don't, is my answer to that. They only seem interested in tech companies. Okay. One of the videos that I'm going to have coming out in the next couple of weeks is going to somewhat answer this question, at least because this question comes up all the time. But the question, do investors discriminate? No, they don't. But here's the thing, not all investors are created equal. That's the fallacy in the question you're asking. Is you're making the assumption that every single investor in the world is a tech investor. They're not. There are investors that like investing in service-based businesses. Your goal is to find them if you have a service-based business. So regardless of what business we're in, we need the combination of three things to happen to find investors. They have to be interested in the type of company we're developing. That's piece one. If they're not going to invest, full stop. The second thing, they have to be interested in investing in, I'm going to call it the geography where we are. In other words, if we are based in London, we're based in Missouri, we're based in California, wherever you might be in the world, they have to be interested in investing where you are geographically. If they're not, they will not invest, full stop. Number three, Number three, they have to want to invest at the stage and the amount of money you're asking for. So let me give you the contrast here. If you reach out to a late stage investor, because they're late stage investors, they're early stage investors, they're seed stage investors, all types of different investors. If you invest in a late stage investor for your early stage startup, they're not going to be interested in investing. Full stop. Never happens. Even a Series B investor is not going to be interested in investing in your Series A company. They invest in Series B. So we have to find the intersection of these three things, regardless of the business we're in, to be able to find investors that will work with us. That's your mission. So no, they are not discriminating against your service-based business. You have to find service-based investors. My recommendation is use a tool like Crunchbase.com. I think there are over 300,000 investors listed on their site. So you just have to do the work. Okay, next question we have. If you have questions for me, by the way, you can put them on the chat box if you're watching on Zoom, which means you're part of my group Zero to Pitch, which is where you can essentially build out your pitch deck draft. And then if you want to take it to the next level, you can join Zero to Pitch Gold and do that. Oh, which reminds me of something, actually. So I'm going to do that. Give me 1 second here. I forgot. Shame on me. There. That's better. Okay. Should be able to see me in this. There I am. Okay. So anyways, join Zero to Pitch Gold if you want to take it beyond the draft level to full on, really investor ready pitch. You can work with me there. So anyways, with that being said, and you just click on that link over my left shoulder there, scan that QR code, and you can be in today. So if you are interested, that's the way to go. So anyways, next question. Is there a time limit for a startup to go after funding? Nope. No time limit. There are no rules, no nothing. For example, it took me 2 years, 2 years for us to raise our initial funding. Now, there are many reasons. I have many stories on this. There are many mistakes that we made and I made in the fundraising process, but there are no rules. You can take as long as you want. There is one of the things that does happen on the flip side of this is that the longer you're out there, the more wary investors become, because they feel like it is the deal has been what they will call shopped. In other words, you've shopped the deal from investor A to investor B to investor C to investor D, all the way around the horn. And investors, there's a lot of a herd mentality with investors. So they don't want to look stupid to their friends. Why'd you invest in that company? We looked at them, all that type of stuff is real. I remember when we found our second investor, my first investor, Gil said to me, am I going to look stupid doing this deal? You've been working with us for a while now. I was just thinking to myself, the stupidity of the question. And I love Gil. I think he's a great guy, but it was a lame question to ask, but that's how investors think. They don't want to look stupid. So you have to deal with all this garbage too. And then also understand that the longer you're out there, probably at some level, the worse the deal is going to be, because people know that there's a desperation that sets in at some level. So just remember all those things are true. So anyways, no, there's no time limits. You can do whatever you want. It's the decision of when to stop, which is probably the second thing that you're thinking about, is when to stop. That is a very personal decision. I can only tell you my thinking on it, because we were told no a lot before we heard yes. And there are people I know that we went through 63 investors before we finally raised our funding. There are other people I know that have gone over 200 investors. It's your decision of when is enough enough. I made the decision that I wanted to feel like we laid it all out there on the field. I wasn't going to give up until I felt like we'd done everything humanly possible. I didn't want to look back and say I gave up too early and regret it. That was my thought process. Yours might be different. Economically, maybe you can only go 6 months or 9 months or a year without a salary, without a paycheck, to pursue your dream. And then you have to just give up because of financial reasons. Whatever it is, it's totally on you what you decide to do. Okay, our next question. Hey, I love your videos. I would like to thank you for all your help. You're welcome. You've really taught me a lot. You're welcome again. No worries. All right, let's go to our next question. Okay, it's a long question. This is on our Zoom audience. I am building a deep tech startup pre-funding. I don't have an official co-founder yet, but I have a senior person contributing part-time around 10 hours per week, and others interested once funding is secured. I plan to offer them equity. How do I decide who counts as a co-founder versus a founding engineer or a part-time contributor, given that some will only join full-time only if funding is secured? Boy, there's a lot of different questions here. Is it worth it to have a part-time technical team with small equity each? Well, there's a lot of questions here. Who's a co-founder? There are no rules. Literally, you can decide whatever you want. I have a basic thought process on it, which I'll share with you, but it's totally up to you. There is no book that says these are the rules for what is a co-founder and what isn't a co-founder. But my basic rule is this. If somebody decides to join the company before we take on external funding, that person is a co-founder. That's the way I look at it. You can look at it differently, but that's how I look at it. So that answers your first question. Then the founding team, typically, these are people who will join you after the money comes in. That's your founding team, are the people that join after the funding comes in. That's the way that I look at that. And then your third question, is it worth it to have a part-time technical team with small equity each? Sure. If they're doing good work, then why not? I don't know what small amount of equity is, but that's the way that I would look at it. Sure, why not? That's just fine. Go ahead and do that. It's whatever makes sense in your personal situation. Be careful with the equity, is what I would tell you. Make sure that it vests over time. Make sure they're vesting agreements for all for everybody, your co-founders, especially, and founding team, and people that you hire after that. Always, always, always have the equity vest over time. That's a super critical component to all of this. Because if you don't, you end up with what's called debt equity, and that is a bad thing. Imagine if you have a co-founder 50-50 between you and another co-founder, and you give them 50% and they quit, and there's no vesting schedule, and they have 50% of the equity in the company. That's a lot of debt equity. That means equity not associated with the business anymore. That's a big problem, and you'll have to figure out how to solve it. It's a solvable problem, but it's not an easy one. Okay, let's go to our next question. Brett, in my country, a lot of crops go to waste. I mean, out of 650 million tons of food, 30 to 40% is wasted. Around 50% of the waste happens at the time of harvesting, and the remaining 50% is due to low usage before it reaches people. There's a lot of shortage problems and other issues. Okay, I'm an entrepreneur and have failed many times. I'm 22 years old. Well, how much could you have failed if you're 22? Wait till you get to my age. I understand what the real problem is, but people aren't noticing it, even though AI and other technologies are being applied elsewhere. I'm trying to build the next Google or Facebook. Okay. Our country has many problems, but entrepreneurs are doing what is already being done globally while we are far behind compared to the EU, America, and other countries. My question is this: do global investors still look at problems like this? And second question, investors seem to invest mostly in very established companies, banks, cement, polymers, chemicals, and other fields. But in AI, ed tech, and fintech, there is less investment. Okay, it comes back to the same thing I said earlier, if you were listening at the beginning. There are likely investors for what you're doing. They need to invest in your country. If they don't invest in your country, they will not work with you. That's number one. Number two is they've got to be interested in the investing in your area. Sounds like a really unique, I love unique ideas personally. I love ideas that are, hey, nobody's looking in this. We're looking at those are much better than looking where everybody else is. It's contrarian. There's a lot of goodness there. They're likely investors there. You just have to hunt and find them. Don't give up. And they have to be interested in investing in your stage of investment. Those three things. It is doable. But you have to find people that are the next thing is about that the market is Pakistan is not yet mature. You have to find people that are interested in investing in Pakistan. Full stop. If they're not interested, it doesn't matter. None of the rest of it does. So anyways, I hope that helps. And you love my book. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right, let's go to our next question. When you were raising money, what are the questions you asked your investors to see if they're the right fit? Okay, this is a good question. I think I just did a video on this as well recently. The beyond right fit, I mean, right fit in terms of are they interested? That's the pre-work we've been talking about, right? So you have to kind of do your research, to find the people that are interested in your area of investment. Then the secondary things that I'm interested in, let's say that you find people that are interested in what you're doing, is are they going to be good to work with? So the first thing that I would do when you get to the point where everybody's interested in each other and it's getting really serious and they're ready to give you a term sheet, or maybe they've given you a term sheet, is I'd like to talk to 3 portfolio companies of yours, 3 people that you're working with. They're going to do reference checks on you. Why shouldn't you do reference checks on them? Absolutely do them. Learn. Super important to do this. So that's the first question I would be asking is I want that. And if these are kind of like red flag things. So if they tell you, no, I won't give you, I won't do it, I can't do it, whatever, you should be, that's a warning sign that something's off, because they should be glad to introduce you to their partner companies that they're working with. There should be no reason they won't. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I would be looking at if I'm in your shoes is, okay, tell me about, what happens and what you've done when a company is struggling. What's been the way that you've dealt with that? And the reason why you're asking that type of a question is you want to understand how do they support their portfolio companies when things go south, when there's an issue, when there's a problem, because there are going to be issues and going to be problems, guaranteed. No company is perfect. No CEO is perfect. No team is perfect. So we want to kind of understand what happens. And you want to listen intently to the answer, because they're going through it with every single one of these companies that they're working with. What have they done? And what you don't want to have happen is you don't want them, cutting and running the other direction, right? You want to know that they're going to be there and going to support you. So that's the next question. Third question to ask, what's been their, where are they in the investment cycle of this fund? Do they have money for follow-on investments? And if so, how much have they allocated to your investment? The reason why this is important is this round will not be the last round of funding your company takes in all likelihood. Most companies have multiple rounds of funding to be successful. So how much money have they allocated? Do they have more to allocate to you? Because you want to know that they're going to be with you for multiple rounds of funding. So ask the question. So those would be 3 pretty good questions to ask, which would really help you understand what's going on and how good a partner you're going to have. There are more questions. I have a video on this that I've done that you can find on my channel that'll help you. But that's what I would ask. All right, next question. By the way, if you have more questions for me, you can put them in the chat box on Zoom or YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, you can put them in the chat box on YouTube. If you're watching on Zoom, you can put them in the chat box on Zoom if you'd like. Either way, it means if you're watching on Zoom, you're part of my free group, Zero to Pitch. You're working there, get you to a draft ready pitch deck. And then if you want to take it further, you can join Zero to Pitch Gold. The QR code is over my left shoulder. And from draft ready to full on investor ready pitch deck, we can get you there with Zero to Pitch Gold. Let's see, the next question we have. Hi, I am a student in Bangladesh. Very cool. And I just created my pitch deck. Do you think as a college student, an investor will invest in my idea? I have absolutely no idea because I don't know you. I don't know what you're trying to do, but investors invest in college students, high school grads all the time. I think Peter Thiel has a, which I don't agree with, by the way, but he has this whole thing where he doesn't even want people going to college anymore, which I don't think is the smartest thing in the world, but whatever. And he likes young people that he can just mold and do whatever with. Probably the more serious answer to your question, the way I think about, where do young people have advantages versus older people, and where do older people have advantages versus younger people, is the way that I think about things. So in emerging markets and new markets, I believe young people have significant advantages versus older people, because in a young market, right, in a new market, you can kind of come up with whatever you want in terms of how you're going to go do things. And there is no experience advantage that somebody my age would have versus you, because you, as a younger person, you might be more creative. You might come up with things, and nobody's going to value the experience I bring to a new market. That's why when you think about the social media companies that have been created, they're all pretty much created by young people. However, where experience matters is in existing markets, more mature markets. That's where experience matters. You may still disrupt the market. You may still have a disruptive idea, but people want people with experience because they're used to working with them. And the experience of understanding the market and the market dynamics helps, because you're not going to make company killing mistakes. That's the other piece of this. So I hope that helps. Okay, let's go to my next question. In our country, Pakistan, the largest funding received so far was $65 or $85 million, I believe that is. That's not bad. And that was by Airlift. I listened to a podcast of their co-founder, and I asked him how they managed to get such a large amount of funding and whether it's possible to get even more. He said something straight from the heart. When a founder starts dreaming big, the funding will come automatically. I agree. Shantanu, wow, this is a name from the past. I am glad to see you, at least here. That's good news. I hope you're doing well. When investors fund companies that are a feature masquerading as a product, and that niches like legal tech or marketing tech get so saturated, is this aligned with historical signals of a bubble? Here it's an AI bubble. Yeah. Oh, yeah. 1,000%. I'll give you the analogy that I think about, because I saw this, and it was near and dear to my heart, because for the people that don't know me, my background is semiconductors, and I spent most of my professional career in semiconductors. And I saw in the late 90s tons of these kind of companies, which were really one product companies that really were nothing more than a product, not even a product line. And this was in the run-up of the comms bubble of the late 90s, and these companies were flipped by investors. In other words, the investors would invest 5, 10, $15 million in them and flip them for hundreds of millions of dollars within a year or 2 years. and they would, and the companies, most of them failed. Even the companies that acquired them failed, and it was all a big old bubble. So when you mentioned that, that's immediately what popped into my head was that, because I've lived this and I've seen this before. And AI definitely, there's a lot of rumors about various offshoots of AI bubbles right now that I keep hearing about, especially with regard to data centers and chips in data centers. Specifically, maybe that's because of my chip background, I keep hearing about this. So there's a lot to worry about in that particular area. So yeah, I think you're onto something. All right, let's see what our next question is. Okay, this is back to the fellow from Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, many people suffer a lot while traveling short distances, mostly in cities. I want to work on that. I want to build an urban EV mobility business. Where can I get investors? Well, I can't help you with that. Again, to go back to the theme of the day, it seems like you have to find people that might be interested in this type of thing. So my basic tool for this, if I'm starting out and I'm you, regardless of whether I'm in Bangladesh, Pakistan, the United States, Europe, Asia, doesn't matter, is the tool that I would use because I think it's got the most comprehensive list of investors out there. And if I don't know anybody, I would use this as a starting point, is I would use crunchbase.com. They have a 7-day free trial. So in 7 days, you can probably build out your list of investors. You can do beautiful sorts in there. You can do lovely searches in there where you can use that to find people that invest in Bangladesh. Hopefully you can find that list. And then from there, look and see whether they invest in things which are similar to what you're trying to do. Build your list out from there, find the people and reach out. That's what I would do. Okay, our next question. We've got a lot of questions lined up here and I got about 30 minutes to go. So let's see what we can do. When does a startup stop being a startup? It's an interesting question. In biotech, there are a number of public companies that are still pre-PMF. Are those still startups? Okay, so I think I'm going to give you my answer to this, and I'm not trying to be glib, and I'm not trying to be mean, but it doesn't matter. Again, it's like the definition of who's a co-founder and who isn't. It's like, who cares? Whether they're a startup or not, who knows, what we're going to define as a startup, what we aren't going to define as a startup. Literally, who knows? It doesn't matter. I mean, this company I worked at for years, we used to call ourselves a startup when we were at $1 billion in revenue. We said we operated like a startup. Startup is just a thought process. There is no definition in the dictionary that says this is a startup and this isn't. So it's an irrelevant thing. It's wherever you're at. That's the company you are. How you run the company might be more like a startup. I think I heard Steve Jobs when he was alive talk about the fact that he ran Apple like it was a big startup. It's just a way of mind. It's a way you think about things. So that's the way I would think about it. All right. Our next question. Hello, I invented a device to hang frames on walls. It's patent pending, and I am working on branding. While there are no other products like mine right now, I know that it might be copied one day. All right. I'm not sure where the question is there. Okay, there it is in the next piece of this. Aside from my patent, what can I do to prevent this from happening? You have to keep moving. First of all, the patent really isn't going to help you a hell of a lot, especially if we're small. For a small company, patents are kind of like for defense, but how are you going to have all the money to go after people just because you have a patent? And even if you do have a patent, that patent might be very narrow in scope and might be very easy to get around. We want broad patents, which are much harder to get around. So, a device to hang frames on walls, I honestly can't answer that. You have to kind of think about, what's your vision for what you're going to do, and how easy is it going to be to replicate what you're doing? That's really the question. How easy is it going to be to replicate this? So you know that answer. I don't. So based on that, what does that tell you? How easy or how hard is it going to be? That's the way I would come at this. And if it's easy, okay, fine. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It just means, okay, this is our entry product, and we better keep innovating a lot, because it's going to be pretty easy for people to come at us and copy what we're doing. And we're going to have to do more and more and more. There are plenty of businesses that start this way. And it's just a matter of what can we just keep doing to innovate, innovate, innovate. And the more you innovate, the more different you get. And that's what you want to do, is speed up that innovation cycle so that you just go faster than everybody else in an ideal world. Okay, our next question. Now that building technology is easier, what are the moats of the future? I don't know. That's such a broad question. Building technology is easier doesn't mean, building technology always gets easier. If we go back in time 100 years, it was a lot harder to do things than it is today. And then there were all these innovations that came up. And with the innovations came new moats. And then new innovations come up. And there are new moats created by those innovations. And so forth and so on. The cycle just keeps going. There'll always be moats. There'll always be differentiation. The moats are what you do, and it's typically the brain power of the people involved. So it's such a broad question the way you're asking it that, again, it's an impossible question to answer. I would worry about, in your specific case, what are you going to do, and how hard is it going to be for people to replicate what you're doing? That's the most important thing. The broad question is an irrelevant one. Let's go to our next question. Hi, should deep tech innovation-driven startups follow a different playbook from a typical startup? It's often hard to build an MVP or demonstrate technological advantage without early funding. This is the big challenge. For deep tech, which I kind of think of as hardware or whatever, the answer, this is actually a really good question, because it is the question that many companies have to answer. It's the question my company had to answer. It's the question that other companies I'm involved in and advising have had to answer, is when it takes lots of money, millions and millions of dollars to get a product to market. It can take tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, depending upon what you're doing. How do you prove that your thing is going to work? With minimal funding or no funding. So the simple-minded trick, and this is what we did, this is what other companies I'm involved in did, was even though we were a hardware company, pure hardware company, and the other companies I'm thinking about were pure hardware too, is we proved as much as we could in software before implementing in hardware. The more that you prove, the more you reduce the risk. Think risk reduction. That's the way to address this problem, is what can I do to reduce the risk for myself and my investors? Because interestingly enough, you and your investors are on the exact same side of the table on this one. So think hard about what can you do to reduce risk. Push yourself. What would you do? Because it isn't enough to just say, hey, it's going to take $10 million for us to get to build an MVP or whatever. That's your problem. That's not my problem as an investor. That's yours. So you want to keep reducing the risk so that it becomes obvious and inevitable that you will succeed. So think hard about that side of the equation. What can you do? The high level answer is more software, less hardware proof. Think smaller rather than larger proof. All those types of things that reduce costs so that you can kind of show people what you do on a minimal cost budget. That's the ideal thing. That's what we have to do. Okay, if we have questions for me, please put them in the chat box on Zoom or YouTube. I'll be happy to answer them for you. If you are interested in working with me and you want to do this at an entry-level basis, you can join my free group, Zero to Pitch, and you can get your pitch deck up to a draft level there. And then if you want to take it from a draft level to a full-on investor-ready pitch, join Zero to Pitch Gold. The QR code is right over my left shoulder. Just scan that, and you can join, and you can be in today working with me and starting to get investor-ready feedback literally today. All right, let's see what our next question is. In our country, around 800,000 tons of mangoes go to waste. The advantage, back to Pakistan again, the advantage is our mangoes have a sweetness of about 20 to 24, which is the highest in the world. India is second with a sweetness of 18 to 19. If we export to the EU in the form of pulp, there is a tax if sugar is added, but our mangoes naturally have high sweetness, so this is an advantage. We wouldn't need to pay that tax. What is your opinion of this? I have no opinion, to be honest with you. I don't know the market. Is there a demand for your mangoes in Europe? That's the question. I have no opinion. I'm sorry. Next question. Everybody talks about AI and technology, but nobody is looking at the real problems. I don't want to hurt anyone, but what I mean to say is that from your videos and books, I've learned what real problems actually are. Okay, good for you. Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, questions. How do I respond about competition during a business meeting with investors? Okay, I've done videos on this. You can find them on my YouTube channel. You can absolutely do that. So I would suggest you go find the videos, but I'll give you a quick primer on what to do. So the first thing is you want to think about your competitive strategy and the way you explain the competition on your terms, not your competitors' terms. What do I mean by this? Is think about how you're marketing your product or service. So typically, and you also want to align this with your vision. I'm interested in the vision piece, not so much where you are today, but the vision. So when we think about this, typically, differentiate yourself on two key things. And this should align directly with your marketing. If it doesn't, there's a problem with how you're looking at the competition. There's usually two reasons that people are going to buy your product or service versus what's out there. Two key things. What are they? And then you want to map those out. And then you want to compare all the competition. Don't hide the competition. You want to explain all the competition, how they fit versus you. But the beautiful thing of doing it the way I'm doing it, and you can think about, by the way, if you want a quick example of this and you want to watch one of my videos, go watch Steve Jobs introduce the iPhone, because he did the exact same thing. And he aligns everybody on his vision of the world, not theirs. And Apple is aligned perfectly and everybody is aligned not so perfectly. That's what you want to do. That's the simple, quick answer to this. That will work quite well because it's visual, it's easy to follow, and quick to understand exactly how everybody's mapped out. One of the big mistakes I see people make is they don't tell everybody about all the competition. That is a massive mistake. Don't do that. Because if you tell everybody about the competition, the competitive analysis slide is probably my favorite slide in a pitch deck, because there's so many good things that if we do it right, one of which is we build trust with us. If you tell people about all the competitors, if you know the market better than everybody else, which is part of your goal in explaining the competition, go explain everybody. The beautiful thing is, as an investor, the investors trust you, right? Because you haven't hidden anybody. And I'll give you a great example of this. When I was at Crossland Capital as an entrepreneur in residence, and we looked at a company, and I'll never forget, right after the companies would come in, we do a debrief, which is probably typical for most VCs. And when we talked about this particular company and we're going around the room, Mike Stark, who is I think he's still the managing partner there, Mike said, they told us about competitors we didn't even know about. And he was really impressed. And lo and behold, what happened? Crosslink invested in them. Part of the reason was because there's a lot of trust between the CEO and the investors. You want to know the market, you want to come off as the expert. That's one of your goals. The other goal is to differentiate yourself. But these two things together combine. You show integrity, you build trust, you know the market better than everybody else, and you've explained your marketing strategy, and you've explained how your competitors, in a way, interesting enough, where you haven't said how horrible they are. You've just said, hey, they're good at what they do, but we're better. That's a winning strategy. Next question. I'd love to hear your approach to test the waters, start collaborating with a co-founder that you don't previously know. Well, this is kind of like dating, is the first thing that I would tell you. Co-founder relationships are intense relationships. It's a marriage. Think of it like dating, except with more intensity than a marriage, because there's a lot of money involved in this. You don't know the person as well. So you want to have a lot of different, if you don't know the person beforehand, before you even start collaborating, you want to have a lot of different conversations with this person about how they see business, how you see business, how they see the market, how you see the market, how they see running a company versus how you see running a company. You want to feel like there's a lot of alignment between you and this person. Before you even start working together, you want to make sure that they see things the way you see things, that it's likely to be a good marriage, or at least to have a reasonable chance, because 50% of these relationships fail, and the failures happen quickly, like within a year. So you want to do a lot of pre-work before you even start the work. And then if you don't know the person, again, I would ask for references, and I would do backdoor reference checks if I could. People that you don't, who you know that know them, but you're talking to them, even if you haven't asked for permission, so to speak, from your co-founder. You want to talk to as many people as you can to get a really good read on how this person is going to be to work with. And then you want to kind of understand their concerns, their objections, their fears. And then you want to see how they're going to be to work with. And then even when you start working with them, and even if you've divided up the equity, to go back to something else I said earlier, you want to have some sort of reverse vesting on the equity so you're protected just in case it doesn't work out, because there's a 50% chance it won't. All right, let's go to our next question. We got a little bit more time to answer questions. Hey, Brett, just popping in to say thank you for your knowledge. You're welcome. You've helped our startup hit the ground running. That's good to hear. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, next question. Would you say it's harder for investors to work with a startup that hasn't brought in any revenue? No. You see this all the time. It's interesting because somebody else was talking about a company, I think it was in the pharma space, the bio space earlier in our conversation today, that was already public and had no revenue. So no, as long as you're meeting your milestones and goals and the value of the company goes up, investors are happy. It may be that it takes you a long time before you get to market. And that happens all the time, depending upon what you're doing, because it can take a long time to build something. Now, having said that, there's some smart things that I would do. And let me give you a great example of this, regardless of what we think about the person, because this to me is like the ideal example. And think about SpaceX and think about Elon Musk. I think he started a company like 25 years ago. And his pitch to his early investors was this, really simply: we're going to Mars. That was essentially the pitch. I'm sure there was more to it, but the basic pitch is that. So we can think about, we're going to Mars. And here we are 25 years later. Has he made it to Mars? No. Has he made his investors a ton of money? Yes. Because the second piece, and I don't know whether you said this, but this is what I would have said if I was him. And between now and however many years it takes us to get a rocket to Mars, we're going to make you guys a ton of money by doing Starlink and this, that, and the other thing. So by doing all these intermediate steps, which are all steps that he needed to do in order to get to Mars and then to be able to monetize them, now suddenly it gets a lot easier, because now you've reduced risk because now we've got something in the marketplace, we're making money with it, and the value of the company even goes higher. So to me, that's the ideal strategy. Have your long-term vision of something, the go to Mars piece of your business, and then try and monetize things in between then and now. That's a home run on many different levels, the more you can do that. Okay, let's see what the second part of your question was. Currently, do have products that would bring in revenue. Main issue is marketing cost. Okay, well, that's kind of answering my question. So from a marketing piece, let me just give you a book idea to read, which maybe you'll adjust your thinking, because we don't have to spend tons of money on marketing, to be successful at what we do. So the book I'm going to recommend, it's a weekend read. So if you buy it today, it could be with you tomorrow, and you could be done with it by Monday easily. And the book is Traction by Gabriel Weinberg. It'll give you a nice framework to think about how to market your business. Very logical approach to how to do this. To me, it's my favorite book on the subject. So take a look at that book. I think it'll help you. All right, let's go to our next question. Okay, we don't have any other questions at this time. I'm going to take a drink if you don't mind. Okay. No more questions. All right, well, we'll end a little early today. I'm not going to answer the personal question. I'm sorry. The person that was asking me that. Okay, great. We got another question. Perfect. When starting to collaborate with a co-founder during the pre-incorporation phase, is it advisable to sign NDAs and IP assignment agreements before incorporation? Yeah, you can do that. I think that's fine. I do like the idea of the IP assignment thing. I think that's a good one to do. The NDAs and stuff like that, NDAs are really hard to enforce, so, and look, you have to, part of this challenge here, if you want to do this, is there has to be trust between you and your prospective co-founder. That's part of the challenge here. So you're adding kind of friction into the negotiation between you and the other person by doing this, which makes it a little bit harder to show trust, because remember, there's a flip side to this, and that's their side. And the less trust you show, the more likely it is that the deal won't work. So it's a real hard one. The NDA piece is I know people do it, and you can absolutely try and do it, but it's a real hard one, to do, is what I would tell you. I'm sorry, I'm thinking about two things at once, because it's just difficult, to do what you're suggesting to do. And I was trying to think back if I had my co-founders sign NDAs, even the ones I had some co-founders not work out, by the way. And they, in fact, two of them started a competing business. So I can understand your fear on this subject, but yet we were still able to raise money and they weren't. And there were a lot of different reasons for that. So I get what you're doing. I think it's a case by case basis. Yeah, you can do it. Typically what people sign is what's called a PI. I always get this wrong. PIAA, I think, proprietary invention assignment agreement, essentially, which is the thing that you're talking about. That's the IP assignment thing, which says anything that's developed while you're working with us is the company's property, not yours. I think that's spot on. So if you want to do it plus the NDA and you say this is company policy, then yeah, go ahead and do it. I'm just thinking through the answer more. So yeah, go ahead. But then again, it's got to come back to these other things we talked about earlier. It has to be this trust between you and your prospective co-founders. Okay, let's go to our next question. Got a few more minutes here. Our startup is part of our university accelerator. We're working out, we need 180. Okay, I get it. 180 to 210,000, I don't know, euros, dollars, pounds, whatever, for 16 to 18-month runway. Okay, good for you. That's smart. Is it advisable to do this purely with angels? At that amount of money, if it's 180 to $200,000, yeah, it's probably going to be angels, friends, and family money, because it's probably going to be too small for the next group of investors. So that's the right way to think about it, is what I would tell you, because that's going to give you the answer. Because if you try and go to a larger investor, they may not want to write that small of a check. It's just not worth it. So I think that might answer your question. All right. Okay, do we have any other questions? Maybe I've got something in the Q&A here. Okay, nope. Thank you. Appreciate your answer. Okay, cool. All right, so I'll give you guys another minute or so to ask questions. Just have another little sip of water. All right, very good. And I'll give you guys just another minute or so to, if you have any other questions for me, you can pop them in on Zoom or YouTube, and I'll be happy to answer them on the chat box in either one. And just as a final reminder, if you want to get to a draft level pitch deck, join my free group, Zero to Pitch. There are links for that on my YouTube channel, if you're not already part of that group. And if you're part of that group already, or if you just want to skip to the main event and you already have a draft level pitch deck and you're unhappy with it, want to get it to investor ready, then join Zero to Pitch Gold. The QR code to join is right over my left shoulder. Scan it, join it, and you could be literally getting investor level advice on how to get your pitch investor ready today. So with that, I'm going to say thank you all so much. Take care, and I will see you soon. Have a great day. Bye.